Anne from Witchcrafts. Welcome back to what is now episode 3 of my Wreck This Journal series. So let's go and have a look at the first page. So the prompt for this page is to poke holes in the paper. And I decided I wasn't going to just do that, I was going to actually turn the holes into something. My first thought when I looked at them was that they looked like a constellation. So because I knew I was going to be painting onto the page, I wanted to trace the holes through to the other side of the paper so that I could see where they were, so that when it came to time to poke holes, I knew where the holes were supposed to be. So I'm using this nifty little light box. It's a USB one and it plugs into your computer, and it's got 3 different settings of brightness that you can use to be able to see through different thicknesses of paper, and it's really useful. I'm going to be using my Pebeo Studio acrylic gesso. This is a black acrylic based primer that you would normally put onto a canvas in order to prepare the surface, but because it gives a matte finish, it's got a very slight sheen to it, but mainly a matte finish, I decided to use it on this page. So what I did next was to mark the position of where the holes were going to be using a white Chinagraph pencil. I'm going to be using acrylic paint, so I just have some white, some blue and some black, some yellow and some metallic gold, some silver, and finally some bronze, more a coppery colour than bronze, but it's labelled as bronze. I started off, I wanted to put blue. The scene that I'm painting is a nighttime scene, so I wanted there to be a dark sky, but I also wanted it to be obvious that it was actually sky even though it was dark. And I'm actually using a reference here. It's of one of my very favourite paintings ever, and I don't profess to be making a copy of the original piece of artwork, but I'm hoping to use it as inspiration for this page. So I put down some pale blue and then overlaid it with some dark blue acrylic paint, and then what I'm doing now is using a large soft brush which is dry, just to feather out the edges a little bit and blend them in a bit. Now I'm using some yellow with white and gold to pick out where the moon and the stars in my constellation are going to be, and then some darker yellowy orange to draw in the moon and to surround the stars to give them a bit of a halo. Next I'm using a very small paintbrush to draw some small lines using white paint to describe a sort of a cloud. You still get clouds at night, but they're difficult to see, and more white paint just to surround the halos of the stars and the moon. Now I wanted to add some texture, so I'm just using a bamboo skewer here. You could use a cocktail stick or anything you've got. The paint was already starting to dry because of the heat from the studio light, so it was a bit tricky, but I just used the stick just to scratch some lines through the layers of paint just to create a bit of texture. Now I wanted to add a little bit more detail and tone and shading to the moon, so I'm just using some pale yellow on a very small paintbrush here just to add to the edges of the moon to make it look a bit more like it's glowing. And then I wanted to add the same into the cloud formations. using the dry paintbrush again to just feather out the lines that I've put on with the paint colours, and just to blend them in a little bit, and it also creates a bit of a sort of starburst effect. Next I'm using a very dark blue to draw in the landscape, the hillside, the silhouettes of hills. And there's also I'm not sure if it's a mountain or a tree, but I've added that in on the left hand side as well. And in case you hadn't guessed, this is my interpretation of Starry Night by Vincent van Gogh. I'm not proclaiming to be as good as Van Gogh at all, but I love this picture and I was really pleased to be able to pay homage to one of my favourite works of art. Once the painting had dried, which took quite a long time because of the number of layers of paint, it was time to poke the holes. So I decided to pop them through from the front first of all, because then I could make sure that they ended up where I wanted them to be. And then I turned the paper over and pushed the holes through from the back to make a much larger hole. As you can see, I haven't really managed to get the holes where they were originally intended to be, but I think this works okay. Now I'm taking a piece of yellow card and placing it behind this page, and the yellow will be able to be seen through the holes. I just folded the edges of the paper back gently just to make sure that you could actually see the yellow poking through. I used some double-sided tape in a dispenser here. It's very, very sticky. It's good stuff this, it's cheap just from Amazon. It's not a particular brand, but it is very, very good, and it gives a nice thin line of glue. And then I put the yellow card in and just smoothed it down to stick it in place. Next I needed to trim off the excess card from around the page, so very carefully using a Stanley knife with a cutting board underneath to just trim off the excess. And then I just neatened up the edge with scissors. I'm so pleased with how this turned out. I really enjoyed being able to experiment with the acrylic paint. I knew it wasn't going to soak the page because the paper in this journal is not very thick. I really enjoyed being able to do something in representation of one of my favourite pieces of artwork. The second page today is drawing with glue, and I was really pleased when this page was picked because I had seen a video on YouTube showing drawing with glue, and it turned out really well. It sort of looked like a bit of a resist where someone had used glue straight from a dispenser bottle to write some words and then gone over the top of them with a watercolour wash. and then peeled off the glue to leave behind a white area. So that was my initial thinking behind what I wanted to do for this page. I decided to draw a glue pot with a paintbrush sticking out of it and some dribbles of glue coming down the side of the pot. I have never used glue in this way, far too messy, but I thought that this would be quite a good fun way of drawing with glue and also showing glue. So what I decided to do, having done some tests and finding that just ordinary PVA glue was too watery, I made up a concoction of PVA glue, talcum powder and a little bit of water just to make it flow better. I've used this sort of thing before. You've seen me do it on when I did the front cover of the Wreck This journal as texture paste, and it does work really well, and it's cheap and easy to make. So if you want to have a look at how I did that, then you can have a look at my video. So having applied the glue with the bottle, I just went in with a bamboo skewer and just neatened up the edges of it slightly, and then I wanted to encourage it to drip down the page to make it look a little bit more like it was dribbling. So I just held the book vertically until that happened. I did go over the word glue, but it sort of blobbed quite badly, so I did eventually end up wiping that off. So I'm just doing the paintbrush here as well. To wait quite a long time for it to dry, and as you can see, the water in the glue has soaked into the page and it's gone quite blobby, and it's also very flat now. It's not raised up and pronounced like I hoped it would be. I did see another video recently showing using shaving foam mixed with paint to make puffy paint, so I do wonder if I could do the same with glue to make something look a bit better. I also realised that there was absolutely no chance of being able to peel this glue off the page without completely destroying the picture and ripping the page. So I have gone with just leaving the glue drawn areas on the page, and I'm going to be using this set of watercolours. I wanted to add a wash across the glue pot first of all. The paper sucked the paint in like you wouldn't believe, so I had to mix up some more. It's very absorbent paper. And as you can see, where it's soaked in, it's actually gone in behind where I applied the glue, and so the glue has not stayed white, it has absorbed the colour of the paint that I added in. As you'll know if you've been watching my videos for a while, that I really dislike white backgrounds, so I'm just adding in an Old Faithful blue watercolour wash just to show an idea of some kind of background. And then green to show that this pot's actually been put outside because it's very leaky and disgusting and you wouldn't want it indoors. Once the first coat had dried, I just darkened some areas slightly. And then just to add a little bit of interest, some dark green strands of grass in the background. And then I waited for the watercolour paint to dry, and then I'm going to be using my Micron fine liners here. This is the 0.5 nib, which is my go-to, and I wanted to add outlining to the illustration just to define the edges a bit more clearly. And of course a bit of wildlife in the background. Now I wanted to colour in the word glue, so this is a Signo gel pen. I've used the Jelly Roll white gel pens in the past and not been very impressed with it, even though it's supposed to be the best. So someone recommended this one to me, so I got one and it seems to work really well. I still wasn't happy with the whiteness or lack of the glue itself, so I'm going to use some white acrylic paint to colour in the glue splodges, just to make them a bit clearer. It's good because you can still see the texture from the glue mixture underneath, but the white of the glue is much more clearly defined. PVA dries clear, so it's a little bit false, but it's artistic license. And this is the finished piece. I'm quite pleased with how it turned out. It was good fun. I've learnt a few things about how to draw with glue and how not to draw with glue, and what works and what doesn't. As you can see, I've used colouring pencils just to add a little bit more tone and definition and shading to the edges of the jar, and also to the glue. Thanks very much for watching. I hope you enjoyed this video. If you have, then please consider subscribing to my channel, and don't forget to ring the notification bell so that you don't miss out on any of my future posts, which will include my competition early next week. Thanks very much for watching. See you next time. Bye.